It does. And what we'll probably find through this is that we can use those things as fuel, not in the ways it has been in the past,
Right.
but really very deliberately, and in my case, with joy, instead of the frustration that I've experienced so much in a lot of Act One of my career.
Right.
Um, and so we'll talk about it first. I'll tell a little bit of a story, and I am more of an analyst than a storyteller. So please forgive me if this doesn't have uh, the cachet that a brilliant storyteller like Tony might be able to tell the story with. But we'll start out by introducing a hypothetical senior leader named Catherine, who is a white woman, executive leader in a technology group. She is well respected by her colleagues and endorsed by executive leadership, who also think she might be a likely successor to her boss, the CIO of the company. One thing that accelerated her journey to that level is her access and application of her cultural capital. And so, cultural capital, by definition, and this will be the only dry part of our discussion, and feel free to jump in with any questions, thoughts, or comments along the way. I'll pause more frequently. But basically, the concept of cultural capital was coined by a sociologist named Pierre Bourdieu, I think about 40 years ago. And it reflects the symbols, the ideas, the tastes, and the preferences that can be strategically used as resources in social action. So I would say that that is a very neutral description of cultural capital. Until 5 or 6 years ago, I would describe cultural capital as the gates that are the gatekeeping, that let people know who belongs and who doesn't belong.
Right.
And for a long time, I was one of those people who didn't belong, the only one in the room. And if I could be bold enough to say it, living in the Seattle area, often, and I live in the suburbs, way up in Snohomish, in the suburbs, often the chocolate chip and a snickerdoodle.
Yes. Yeah.
And where we live in the suburbs, that proportion is even lower. So it's I think between 7 and 11%, depending on where you go, and we're somewhere between that 7 and 11 up in Snohomish County and Northern King County.
Right. Right.
So yeah, it's a little cultural capital for us goes a really long way.
Yeah.
As while at the company we worked at together, it was my first experience not always being either the only woman in an IT group, in whatever group I was working in IT, and nearly always the only Black person and always the only Black woman.
Right. And that's a stat by itself too, right? Being a minority, but also being a woman in a world where in IT, it's mostly a male dominated world, right? And so that changes things.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. And so, cultural capital can help us to recognize the parts of us, our experience, and really utilize those things to our best advantage, making investments in our future. Basically, being more strategic about and having more agency in how our experience can help us in our careers. So if we go back to Catherine's experience for a minute. Her story begins so long before this glorious moment in her career when she's giving her first TED talk and she's ready to ascend to the CIO position. It started when she was a young adult and she graduated with honors from a prestigious university with academic credentials that opened doors for her.
Oh, wow.
And her journey didn't even start at that point. So that's the point right before she launched her career. If you go even further back, and this is the traditional social capital, the traditional cultural capital that operates the corporate world, and especially tech. In elementary school, Catherine spent a lot of her free time exploring the worlds of science and technology. Her parents made sure that she was surrounded by tools, opportunities to experiment, classes, camps, access to expertise, because one of her parents was in tech and the other was in science. And this is actually modeled after people. This is an aggregate of a lot of people that I know. and they get to go to Take Your Child to Work Day. They have access to and can aspire to things that they've seen before, as she did. For example, playing with her chemistry set at the dining room table while her mom made dinner, because she had all of these tools at her disposal. And those early experiences of hands-on exploration and intellectual curiosity kind of laid that foundation so that she could get to that point where she could get into and graduate from the prestigious school that gets her into BUiLT and ends up with this, phenomenal technology career.
Right.
So it starts even before then, though. So that was her elementary school experience. But even as a toddler, Catherine was already building her cultural capital, because she had a net and a pail in her hand, and she went to, explore preschool, where she got to explore the outdoors and developed a love for problem solving, discovery, and without even knowing it, the scientific method, because that's how her parents taught her to see things. Mm-hmm. So what you see is that these experiences that a lot of the folks who are working hand in hand and side by side with us in our technology careers, they've had an experience where a lot of what we have had to learn on the job or gone out, had to identify as a missing skill or an opportunity to do better, and we had to go after it and find a way to fund it and do it. A lot of those things have been built in to the experience of a lot of our colleagues. And so they naturally, just like generational economic wealth, have generational cultural capital right. to be able to invest, because their parents have had those experiences as well. And so I wanted to set that up. So not so that we would say, oh no, we don't have that experience, but there's been a lot of research lately, and I am living this experience right now. There are so many opportunities that if you look at cultural capital a little bit differently, you can see that it can really help you to navigate your career. Not just your career, but your life, and achieve things that you never thought possible. I'm a purpose-driven person, and it's one of the reasons I was in biotech, was because, and especially I tried whenever I could to work in oncology or cancer therapy, because I wanted to make a difference. And now I get to choose my difference.
Right. That's so.
You said it so well. That's exactly it. You've got all of this. If you look at it as, for a long time, I'll admit and be transparent and a little vulnerable. Mm. And for a long time, those things for me were baggage. Mm. It was, okay, I don't have the official SQL certification. I can use it. I can find anything in this database without bringing it down, but I don't have that certification, and I've got to make a choice. Am I going to finish this management class so I can get my degree? Or am I going to use this money to invest in getting the SQL certification that might give me this much of a chance of getting a promotion in this other area? Mm-hmm. And so, which do I get, my bachelor's or the promotion? And so, while I'm a naturally optimistic person, there were times where I'm like, I resent having to make that choice. Yes. When the people around me haven't had to. Oh. What viewing those things as cultural capital gives you the opportunity to do is, just as you said, is to see it as a toolkit that I now have the knowledge to be able to do the same thing, but also it's kind of a twofer, because not only do you get the skill, but I don't know how many of you are gamers, but your experience points go up because you had to work harder to get that experience. And so your resilience level goes up, your experience level goes up, your tenacity level goes up, your relationship building skills go up, because you have to negotiate with people. I've got a class tonight. I'm going to miss that meeting. I tell you what, if I do all the prep for you, yeah, can you do the minutes? And that builds relationships and opportunities to barter, trade. So that cultural capital is not only applies to those skills that you've learned and developed, but also to what's happening internally and those things that you embody because of what you had to do to get there.
Yeah.
Kesha.
Yes.
Oh, amazing testimony. And sorry, folks, I am driving now, but there's so many nuggets you dropped there. So one about gaming and, the resilience. Are we gamers? We're Black. So just life in America is almost like a I don't know if it's one of those first-person shooter games or more of one of those the different genres where you move up to another level. So yeah, it builds resilience, it builds tenacity, it builds compassion. So tons of components about us being minorities in tech or even in America, build that cultural capital. And then you talked about being vulnerable, feeling some guilt about wearing certain badges of honor. And so, you're a woman too in tech, you're a Black woman in tech or were. And so that is inescapable. And so some of the things that we struggle with, and so I'll be a little vulnerable, just do you feel weighed down because you are Black? Are you even feeling it at such a lower level that you have to go through extra hoops, or you're marginalized in ways that nobody else is, that you are ignoring what now does exist? It's a word, people know it, cultural capital, and you mentioned agency. And so the Me Too movement certainly gave women agency. A lot of dudes went to jail. A lot of corporate brands were destroyed because of bad acting. And so that gave women agency. We still see, President Trump got saddled with, sexually assaulting this lady and everything. That's all. Women have cultural capital and they know how to use it. So we as Black people, do we recognize and understand, and you don't have to be Black, just diverse from the majority. That's actual capital, and it's not something that holds you back. And so I once was venture funding. I don't know if it was Act 3, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. I'm trying to figure out which acts I was in life, but I started a software company and I had a venture fund, and literally at one venture fund deal, the billionaire across the table from me asked me if my grandparents were slaves. And this is in front of my team and their team, and I immediately just said no. And then he said, were their parents slaves? Then I'm like, this dude's serious. Yeah. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the agency, or of course I'm the only Black person in the room. I was just dumbfounded and put back when probably about 3 years later, 4 years later, at my own company, my software company, I had another Black man, my CFO, join. And he said, what I should have said is use my cultural capital and say, hell, I'm still a slave. What do you mean? Were my grandparents slave? Hell, I'm a slave. That's what he said I should have said. And I believe him. We sometimes don't recognize the cultural capital we have about our uniqueness, our diversity, and the world has started to recognize that. And as we know, they do want diversity of thought and mind, and they want diverse communities buy their products and services. So you can actually use that now, whereas I didn't know I had cultural capital. I was back in those years and days that, maybe I was even held back with my own self. And so what you're saying is amazing, and what you've gone through is what a lot of people in our space have to deal with on an ongoing basis.
Yes, absolutely. And building that village. And that's where I realized that being the chocolate chip in the snickerdoodle is really great cultural capital. When I first moved, I thought I've always wanted to live in the same place as Pearl Jam, because yes, I'm a child of the 90s. But I had this thought once I moved, oh, good gravy, what have I done? Because I thought I knew, because I knew how to navigate different cultures at work. Right. I didn't realize that moving away from my family, which I had done before, I moved from LA to the Bay Area thinking that was a huge cultural move. Right. But moving from Oakland, that's right. That's right. Even bigger cultural move. But what I learned, after feeling conspicuous for a long time, I realized that it made me visible to people who otherwise would not have seen me.